I'm John Levy. Good afternoon. Yes, it's, as I said yesterday, I feel very blessed to be the 10th chair of the Board of Directors of the Legal Services Corporation. And on behalf of our outstanding board, they're over here, you're going to see them in action today. I want to welcome you to this commemoration of a truly historic milestone for OSC, our 50th anniversary. And so let's take a moment and look around this room. Let it sink in. No organization reaches a landmark such as this without the tremendous, dogged assistance of so many. And as I indicated yesterday, no one means more to the national network of LSC and its grantees than you, our executive directors, and the boards. And with your board chairs here together, for the very first time, you are together in one room, and you cover the entire nation and the territories. I would like for you to take a second, all of our executive directors, please rise and let's give ourselves a collective hand. It is through your remarkable determination, resourcefulness, that LSC's mission takes life, and you deserve the full measure of credit for LSC's success and resiliency. We also have to take a moment to thank the ABA, NLADA, others in the legal aid community. Your support over the years has been absolutely indispensable, and I want to also thank those who've helped to put this event together, the many speakers, panelists from around the country who've joined us here today, many of the nation's leading law firms, corporations, foundations, individuals have stepped up to support this commemoration, and it wouldn't have happened without them. I'm particularly grateful to our Leaders Council, Emerging Leaders Council, two auxiliaries that we put together about 8 years ago to better help educate the country about the crisis in access to justice. And wow, what a masterstroke it was to ask Ken Frazier and Harriet Myers to serve as co-chairs. Ken and Harriet, they have not only helped with the 50th year, but they work almost tirelessly to advance the cause of access to justice. Finally, LSC's President Ron Flagg and his stellar team have our enormous gratitude for all the help they've given in pulling this two-day event together. Ron. Well, as I think you know, today's program is part of the LSC's 50th anniversary outreach effort, developed with the help of private support we're calling Protecting the Promise. And through this campaign, we will continue our determined efforts to raise awareness of the importance of access to justice and the gravity of the crisis that exists for low-income Americans. It will also help support programs across the country, educate and recruit new voices from many sectors of our society to advocate for civil legal aid. We will particularly focus on the country's persistent failure to make equal access to justice in our civil justice system a reality for so many Americans. As many of you know all too well, LSC's Justice Gap report from just 2 years ago quantifies this failure and sums up the dire situation. Low-income Americans do not receive any or enough legal help for 92% of their substantial civil legal problems. Our network that you represent, 131 grantees with over 900 offices, employing 10,000 lawyers and paraprofessionals, you stretch your limited resources to cover as many individuals as families as possible. But our studies confirm, and you live this, you have to turn away so many qualified individuals because of a lack of resources. So although we appreciate that Congress, in the midst of budget issues, maintained LSC's funding at $560 million, clearly much, much more is needed to close the justice gap after so many years of underfunding. Just think of this. In 1994, 30 years ago, Congress appropriated $400 million for LSC. So our current funding absolutely has not kept up with inflation, population growth, the after effects of the COVID pandemic, or the many issues confronting our country's low-income population. So I have no doubt that LSC's founders would be so very proud of the work of our grantees and the extraordinary network that has been built across the country. But I think at the same time, they would be dismayed at the lack of appropriate funding. And that's why our bipartisan board unanimously requested from Congress $1.8 billion for its fiscal year. That's for fiscal year 2025. And such an increase would make a world of difference for our grantees. And folks, we all know how insignificant even that number would be in the overall federal budget. But funding equal access to justice is not an act of charity. It is an investment in the stability of the American democracy and the rule of law. Our founders believed that ensuring equal access to justice was what Thomas Jefferson called the most sacred of duties of government, and what George Washington called the firmest pillar of good government. Fully funding civil legal aid across the country protects our foundational values. As President George H.W. Bush observed 10 years ago at LSC's 40th anniversary, and I quote him, "LSC plays a vital role in our civil justice system in our country, funding programs in every state that make a crucial difference to millions of low-income Americans. Without the assistance offered by LSC-funded programs, many low-income Americans would simply be excluded from access to the civil justice system." For decades, LSC has championed this core American value, equal access to justice. And at a White House forum just 2 years later, then Vice President Joe Biden recounted the origins of LSC, and he noted that he was the actual presiding officer of the Senate when it passed the LSC Act on January 31, 1974, and Biden called LSC, and I quote him, a passion of his. He extolled the vital services it provides to the country and concluded his remarks with a personal observation, suggesting what his mother would say about it. "This is what my mother would ask if she were here, what would we do without you? What would we do without you? Well, for 50 years, LSC and you, our grantees all across the nation, have made sure we've never needed an answer to that question. Together, we have remained steadfastly committed to LSC's mission of expanding access to justice and recognizing its vital significance to the rule of law in our country. As former director of the Office of Economic Opportunity, Sergeant Shriver observed, "The extension of legal services to the poor is only a means of a more universal end, one we both share, the establishment of the rule of law." And he added, "It is that ordered quest for dignity, for justice, and for opportunity that is the central concern of society today." Well, it needs to be a central concern of our society today. And here's to 50 years and 50 more years to come on that ordered quest for justice. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, and I'll accept those applause on behalf of all of our executive directors. And it's now my great privilege to turn the afternoon over to two of my great friends, the wonderful author extraordinaire who's with us today, John Grisham, and my colleague, former president of the ABA, head of the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity, the wonderful Robert Gray.
John, you're a man of many talents. Thank you for finding my notes. Each time John Levy gets up to talk about us, I am inspired, I'm motivated, and I'm more dedicated than the day before. John, thank you so much for all you do. My name is Robert Gray, and I serve on the board of the Legal Services Corporation. Those who tell the story write the history. We are fortunate to have a very able storyteller with us today. But it didn't start there. Each time we meet, it's an oral history of who we are, recorded for those who will come after us, so that they will continue to carry the baton that has been passed to them to keep America safe, to keep America democratic, and to keep America fair for all of its citizens, for all of its people, both nationally and internationally. The story that Doug Eakley and Secretary Clinton told yesterday was important to hear again. This morning I met with Bucky Askew and a couple of other colleagues. Bucky, thank you for reminding me of our history. When I first joined the ABA, I met a guy named Tom Smeagol, the longest serving member of the LSC board in its history. Tom, thank you for sharing that history. Let's get after it. Let's get after it. I want you to join me in welcoming a lawyer, an author, and a philanthropist, John Grisham. John and I are going to have a conversation with you, for you, through you, and hopefully we will record more of our history. John, would you join me on stage?
There's a place in America called Jonesboro, Arkansas. Young man born there, whole future ahead of him. Made some choices in life. And one of those choices was to be part of the solution for how we maintain a standard of excellence, a standard of justice, and a standard for human behavior. How old were you, 7 years old when you concluded? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to have a conversation with John, and we've decided that it is best to be somewhat spontaneous. I said, well, you know, we've got a script here. He said, I read the script. Let's have a conversation. Give me a little bit of Jonesboro, Arkansas family then and family now.
Sure. My father was a sharecropper, cotton farmer, in actually Black Oak, Arkansas, but the nearest hospital was Jonesboro, and so we were all born there. Those were pretty rough days. I do recall picking cotton and chopping cotton, and those are not fond memories. By the time I was 7, my father had lost everything, and his land was not that productive, and we left the farm actually in the middle of the night to avoid, I think, debt collectors, and we took off. And my dad got a job as a bulldozer operator with a construction company. They moved us around all over the Mid-South for several years, mainly in Mississippi. And then when I was 12 or 13, we settled very near Memphis. All the towns were around Memphis, and that's why Memphis has always been kind of the home area. By the time I was 15, though, things had improved dramatically. My father worked a double shift and was very frugal. My mom worked, and we were living in the suburbs, and life picked up. We had better schools, but leaving the farm was one of the most important moments in my life, because I didn't realize it. But my cousins did not leave the farm, and they should have. It's just not a good way to live. But we had better schools, better opportunity. My parents dreamed of all of us going to college. There were 5 kids. And so I was able to go to college. My parents couldn't go. And at some point, about halfway through college, after 2 years of having a whole lot of fun, I realized that my grades were not too impressive, and I couldn't party for the rest of my life. And we were very strict Southern Baptist home where everything was illegal. I mean, you can't do anything. So we couldn't wait to get away from home and have some fun out in the world. And so I had a lot of fun my first 2 years. And I was inspired to go to law school. And the reason for that was with my background, I wanted to do something, if I could, to maybe give me a chance to make a little money, for the first time, or get a more prestigious position or whatever. So I went to law school and finished at Ole Miss, and went back to my hometown outside of Memphis, and hung out my shingle and declared my own law firm. I couldn't get a job, and well, there weren't really real jobs in the county. I don't want to go anywhere else, and so I hung out my shingle and just said, "Hey, I'm ready to start suing people," and I was a new gunslinger in town with no ammunition. I'm ready to go. And one of my first clients had a profound impact on me as a lawyer, as a person, as a human being. And they were very low-income people who found their way to my office.
You know, it is about the choices we make and the circumstances that sort of presented to us that inform our vision of where we're going to go in life. So, and this is a very interesting story, but that client provided you with an opportunity to become a leader in the community.
Yeah, they lived in a trailer park. They were about to be evicted from their trailer, and they had just got the piece of paper to be in court tomorrow. And there was we had legal aid back then, but the nearest office was an hour and a half away. And what the older lawyers would do in the town would send all of the bad clients to the new guys in town. And so these people found their way to my office. I was the rookie, and they were husband and wife, small kid, and they were really in despair. But they were working poor, and they were about to be evicted. And they lived in a trailer park that we all knew about the trailer park. It was not a nice place, but it's probably about 10 miles away in our county. And that's where the only place they could live. The rent was exorbitant. And I took landlord-tenant law in law school, learned nothing. And then, so I reviewed their case, and I said, I almost said, why don't y'all go next door? But I figured the guy next door sent him over to me. And I realized, well, this is one of my first week or so in the law office, the law business. I just couldn't say no to people who needed help. I could not say no. I could not tell these people, look, you can't afford to pay me a dime. I can't take your case. Because where would they go? There was no other place for them to go. And so I took their case. And by the time we got to court the next morning, they had some neighbors with them who were also being evicted. I picked up 4 more clients. We walked into court, and I wasn't sure what to do, but the judge was a good person. I knew him pretty well. The landlord was there. He was not a good person. He was famous, infamous. And when I walked up to the bench, they called the case, I walked up with my clients, the first 2 clients, first couple. And when they realized that these poor people had a lawyer, everything changed. Everything changed. You've seen it happen. You live it, okay? Low-income people get run over all the time unless they show up with a lawyer. And I realized the power of a law degree, the power of a law license at that moment. And the judge said, Mr. Grisham, you represent these people? And I said, yes, sir. On what basis? I wasn't sure what he was talking about. So I just said, judge is pro bono. And the client whispered to me, he said, what's pro bono? What's pro bono? And I said, well, I think it means that you don't have to pay and I don't get paid. and he liked that. It was okay with him. It's a good deal. And so we roughed up the landlord pretty good. I boned up I stayed up half the night reading the code sections, and there were a lot of errors, a lot of code sections. He had cut corners, and so I had these 4 or 5 clients who were all being evicted. We got all the cases kicked out, and I had time that morning to prepare a 3-page lawsuit suing the landlord for this and that and violations, and also, just for fun, a bunch of punitive damages, which scared the shit out of the guy, okay? Suddenly he was sued for $100,000. And we walked out, and I basically at that point owned the trailer park. They were all mine.
You also got a nickname.
Yeah, they couldn't grasp the pro bono concept, and so they started calling me Lawyer Bono. Here comes Lawyer Bono.
Which provided you with a pipeline of clients.
Oh, I had more clients than I could deal with. I had to hire. I had one secretary I could barely pay. We had to hire another one just to keep up with the people. There were about 100 families in the trailer park, and suddenly they all had problems, and these were legitimate problems. And so I tried my best to help them. And there were some criminal charges, as you might guess, and it was really. I mean, I was going to lose some serious money with these people, and I was trying to make a living. And then a few months later, I guess about a year later, a family was from the trailer park, my people, was involved in a terrible car wreck involving an 18-wheeler that was heavily insured and a driver who was drinking. And so my ship came home real soon. We got a nice settlement, and suddenly I could breathe.
Practicing law, as my mentor told me, is a full contact sport. And you're either on the field trying to score and win, or you're a spectator. He looked at me, he said, "Bobby, which one are you?" You were on the field, you were trying to score and win, you were practicing law.
Yeah, at the same time, to generate fees, I was taking all the court-appointed criminal cases I could possibly handle. There were a lot of them. Again, it was a tradition in the county that the older lawyers had taken those cases. There was no public defender service, so the pro bono, the indigent cases were passed out piecemeal by the judges to really whoever wanted them. And so I raised my hand and took a lot of criminal cases. And I had two murder cases, two murder trials, not capital, but murder trials. My first year out of law school, I tried by myself to jury verdict and got not guilty verdicts. And I really enjoyed. I had this dream of being a big-time plaintiff's lawyer. I wanted the courtroom stuff. I wanted the experience. I really wanted to help people who were getting. I sued insurance companies. My clients were the working poor on this side of the street. Across the street were the insurance companies and the banks, the employers, and the government, whatever. The people with money. And I really got into the trial lawyer syndrome of taking the little guy to court and defeating Goliath. I had no idea that was going to spill over into my fiction, because back then I wasn't thinking about fiction. I didn't dream of being a writer. It's not something I studied. It happened later in life. I was, 30 years old in a courtroom, my courtroom, DeSoto County Courthouse in Hernando, Mississippi, and I saw a trial. I saw something that was extremely dramatic, and it inspired me to try to write that story. And if I hadn't been there that day and seen that and become obsessed with this idea that became A Time to Kill, I would have never written it.
Well, so here is the beginning of He Who Tells the Story Writes the History. And you started with A Time to Kill. How did that go over?
It was a total flop. The book, lucky enough to get the book published. It was exciting to get a phone call from an agent in New York. That was the first magical phone call, and the guy called and said, "I want to represent you." I thought, this is great, I can't believe it. A year later he called and said, "I found a publisher. I've sold the book." And I said, "Who's the publisher?" I'd never heard of the publisher. It was an unknown small press in New York. But it didn't matter. I had a contract. $15,000 advance for A Time to Kill, which I thought was pretty good money in 1987, 88. And I'd been writing every day for 3 years to write A Time to Kill. And so when that was over, I told my wife, who is my first reader and my best friend, and she's an English major and so she's a pretty tough critic. I said, I'm going to write one more book after A Time to Kill, and if the second book flops, you can forget this little career. I'll just keep suing people, or maybe become a judge, or go back to my trial lawyer, something. And so I wrote, in 2 years, I wrote the second book, which was called The Firm. And when The Firm came out in March of '91, it was immediate bestseller, and my whole life was changing rapidly. Once I got the dream, about halfway through my 10-year legal career, which is not much time, I got the dream of writing full-time. No pressure, no clients, no trials, no judges, just sitting back somewhere and writing full-time. I couldn't imagine that dream, but it was so wonderful to think about. And suddenly there it was. And I got up from my office and I walked out the door. I didn't turn off the lights. I slammed the door and I said, I'm no longer a lawyer. I'm going to write full-time.
It turned out pretty good. You have sold over 300 million copies of your stories. You are translated in over 47 countries. You have 10 consecutive bestsellers. I'm sorry, 37 consecutive bestsellers and 10 movies.
I'm going to correct you in just a moment. Actually, it's closer to 400 million, but who's counting, right? I see those numbers. I know how many languages there are because we sell the foreign rights language by language, so I keep up with those. But somebody at Double A sits around and about every 5 years they'll raise the number. It was 250, 300, 350. There's no way in the world they know. You can't. No one keeps up with how many books I sell in South Korea or Greece. We don't know. It's all fiction. It's all fiction. It's all PR.
Well, it is important, however, notwithstanding those points that you've raised, that we understand the American struggle, the American and human plight, and to record that in ways that are understandable to people. You are now a master storyteller. You have a unique perspective because of your background and the way you see it. How does your telling stories and our ability to tell stories shape public policy, public opinion? How do we translate this into ways in which we can improve the way justice is dispensed in this country?
You know, a long time ago, I think that books could have a much bigger impact today than today because you had, well, start with Uncle Tom's Cabin. That book almost started the Civil War. I mean, it had a huge impact on the country because it describes slavery in terms that a lot of people had never seen before. Abe Lincoln told her, "Here, beat your story." When he met her, he said, "Here's the little lady who started the Civil War." Go fast forward 100 years. To Kill a Mockingbird in the early 60s, good book, great movie, back to back, had a huge impact because it was so famous that people around the world read it and saw it, and for the first time saw Jim Crow in the 1930s. Right. And so my longtime editor in the UK is from Scotland, and he said when he read that book and saw that movie, his whole class, they couldn't believe it was true, that people were really treated that way in America. So that book had a huge impact. Some books are like that, I think, historically. Nowadays, though, when you have, because all you had back then were newspapers, before television, books, magazines. Now there's so much information. We see everything up close, live, every night on the news, 24-hour news, the internet. There's so much information now. I'm not sure books have that impact. What I try to do, though, when I write a book with an issue, and the issue can be wrongful convictions or death penalty or legal aid or environmental destruction or whatever, denial of access to justice, civil justice, whatever my idea is for that story. I try to craft it around a legal thriller, a suspenseful story that people can rip through in 2 or 3 days, and then when the book is over, they think about that issue, but maybe they've never thought about it before. What I want to do is raise awareness with the issues that I care about. And I think that's it's not my role. I don't have to do it. I could write the book I published last fall was The Exchange. It's a sequel to The Firm. There's no issue in the book. It's pure entertainment. All the books are designed to be entertaining. Okay, I don't kid myself and tell people I'm trying to write serious literary art. That stuff doesn't sell. I want to sell, okay?
Well, here's the good news. The good news is what you get from what you sell, you share. And part of who we are as a people is not what we receive, but what we give. You are not only interested in writing books, you're interested in the human condition. And you think about that, and not only think about it, but you act on it. There are other things other than writing books that drive you and your family. Talk about some of those things that are part of building a better society.
Thank you. My wife is on the board of Share Our Strength, which is the parent group of No Kid Hungry, and we're doing a lot of work with childhood hunger. Because childhood hunger is one issue that can be solved in this country. We also do a lot of work. There's enough food in America to feed everybody. And there are enough food programs, money that's already designated, spent, and food purchased to feed everybody. The problem is getting it to the kids, the hungry kids, and their families, and there are a lot of them. And so we do a lot of work with No Kid Hungry. My wife and I look at all the opportunities we have, and we focus on hunger, homelessness, and injustice. Those are the main three. And you have to find a focus because there's so many different ways to give. When we do a lot, but we realize homelessness cannot be solved. We can do better. We can do a lot better. Injustice, civil and criminal, is never going to really be solved, but we can do a whole lot better. I would do a lot of work with wrongful convictions. I'm on the board of the Innocence Project and also Centurion Ministries, and I spend a lot of time working on wrongful conviction cases. And if we would change about 5 or 6 laws in this country, state by state, we could go a long way to eliminating more wrongful convictions. But we're making progress, slowly making progress in those areas. It can be done, but you're never going to completely eliminate wrongful convictions. That's the kind of stuff that keeps me awake at night.
Well, it also translates on the civil side as well. Yeah. I mean, part of what we're trying to do is educate. I mean, you're a former legislator, former member of the Mississippi House of Representatives. We have to educate those who are there in a place that can make a difference every day. Talk to us about that. Talk to us about telling the story to those who can make a difference for us, whether they're in the legislature, whether they're in business, whether they're just there trying to understand how to be a positive factor in the civil justice system.
When I ran for the state legislature, I was 28 years old, which should be against the law in every state. My opponent had been there for a long time, and I knew I was confident I could beat him. It was a very close race, and I won the race by all those votes in my trailer park. We realized that
that's a new meaning to a class action.
We realized a lot of folks in the trailer park were not registered, And we fixed that overnight. We got them registered. And then every trailer had a big Grisham sign in the front yard, popped up against it. They all had bumper stickers, banners, billboards. That was my territory. And I got all those votes and won. I ran for the legislature because when I was in law school, and when I was in college at Mississippi State, law school at Ole Miss, at that time, late 70s, Mississippi was still the only state with no public kindergarten system. And we knew that as college students, and we were very bothered by that. When I was in law school, there's a long tradition at the Ole Miss Law School, probably most states, those graduates, lawyers serving in the state legislature. That was a launching ground for politics back then. And I had 4 buddies, and we all decided to run in 1983, 2 years out of law school, to run for the state legislature to try and bring about educational reform and establish a state kindergarten system. That was my motive for running. The job paid $8,000 a year, it took up half your time, so you really couldn't say you did it for money. And when 3 of the 4 got elected, 1 became governor. But we went to Jackson, Mississippi, the state capital, with those very idealistic notions in mind, and I'd like to say we did some good. I frankly couldn't stand public service. What I realized, once you get elected, everybody, I don't care how close the race was, everybody voted for you. Everybody. And most of them want something. They want small things, a driver's license, passport, ticket fixed, or a job. Everybody wants a job. Jobs. And I had no staff. We had no staff back then. We had no secretary. We had to do it all ourselves. And I really, over the first term, 2 or 3 years into my first term, I realized that I really was bad at constituent service. I got to where I couldn't stand the voters. And when you're a politician, you can't stand the voters, it's time to quit. You know?
Well, John, the next time we do this, I really want you to tell us how you really feel about subject matter. Let me close with this. You have 2 children. Daughter's a school teacher, North Carolina. Son has his own law practice, Charlottesville, Virginia. By the way, that's a great state that you live in. I want you to close your comments with this. You've just told us you don't know the background of that legislator that you have to talk to. You don't know the background of that judge that you're going to appear before. You don't know the background of individuals who can make a difference. So there's a certain amount of discipline that we have to have in the way we approach solving these problems of great magnitude. But at the end of the day, we all put on our clothes the same way, one leg at a time. Talk to us about the discipline that you have had to do the work that you've had to do, and about the discipline we have to do the work that we have to do.
I'm not sure I can talk about your discipline. I'll try to talk about mine, and it looks a whole lot more rigorous than you might think. I write for 3 or 4 hours every morning. If I'm at home, it's every morning. And I'm home most of the time, and that's about 1,000 words a day, and that's a lot of words in the course of a year. And I have so many ideas for future novels. I'm still, I think, like a lawyer. The law is where my interests are. And I'm always looking at the law, lawyers, judges, courts, trials, appeals, trends in litigation, law firms blowing up, those sensations, even crime. Those stories that's what I like to read. And when I tell people, when you study lawyers, okay, the material is endless because of all the things they do. Usually, most lawyers are honest, hardworking people who don't make a lot of money, okay? Nobody wants to read about those guys. You want to read about the crook who stole the money and faked his death and, whatever. Those are the fun stories. But I have a lot of ideas. I could have stopped years ago. But also what I've learned over the years is, and this doesn't motivate, greed doesn't motivate me. I've realized that the more I write and the longer I go on and the whatever, it gives me more opportunities to help people. And that's what we as a family really enjoy doing is helping those who are less fortunate, and especially for the causes we believe in. And that's motivational.
Ladies and gentlemen, we should have more storytellers that understand the need for access to justice, to understand the need for fairness, and to understand how to protect the promise. For all the things that you've done, for all the things that you do, and all the things that you see, an opportunity for us to raise that bar, to raise that standard. We want to thank you for always being there for us, for participating in our organization's activities, and to bring the word to us that we should keep the faith, that we should continue to believe. And if you can believe, if you can conceive, then you can achieve 50 more years. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you so much, Robert and John. I have to say, everyone, was that not an amazing conversation to listen to? Now, clearly, the hardest job comes to follow that, so please indulge me. But also, I'm reflecting here, and there's often a saying, like, I wish I was a fly in the room. We are all gnats and flies in this room, and I hope that the message that was just shared by John is carried and echoed even farther than just today. But more specifically, thank you for telling me about that trailer park, and just know that it just got a little bit bigger, and I hope that I can join in the fight too, so thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Try it again. It's the solstice. Maybe, this solar eclipse has gotten us. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Hill. I have the distinct pleasure of serving as one of the Emerging Leader Council's co-chairs this year. But even bigger than that, I have the honor of introducing our next speaker. Dion Dowdy Lacy, I had the amazing pleasure of just meeting a few moments ago, is the co-founder and executive director of the nonprofit United Returning Citizens. Based in Youngstown, Ohio, URC provides job search and training, life and financial literacy skills, transitional and stable housing support, primarily for citizens re-entering society from correctional facilities. Under Dion's leadership, URC has done some amazing things, but more specifically, it has expanded its reach, forging new partnerships with government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and businesses alike. Dion will share with us today her story and intersection with not only access to justice, but her personal connection to incarceration and the role that legal aids have played throughout her life. So do me the great honor, thank Dion for the amazing work that she's done, and please put your hands together for the amazing story that she's about to grace on this stage. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm over 50, I have to put these glasses on. Yes. Well, hello everyone. I am Dion Dowdy Lacy, and it's a pleasure here It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm here today to talk about the experience of someone who has rebuilt their life after a criminal record. But before I go into what I want to say, I want to share a little bit about me, because I'm much more than what my records may show. I'm a proud resident of Mahoney County in northern Ohio. I'm a mother of 3, and I'm a grandma of 5 beautiful grandbabies. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a nonprofit leader. I have been executive director for United Returning Citizens for 10 years, which I have co-founded. I'm an advocate for returning citizens. I'm a community leader. I have served proudly several community organization boards, including my local legal aid organization, Community Legal Aid, which I was the president for 2 years during the COVID-19 pandemic. Years ago, I would not have imagined what my life would look like now. My husband and I was raising our 3 children at the time that he was incarcerated. I was a domestic engineer at the time, and I knew that I had to find employment to take care of my kids. Our house went into foreclosure. I was scared. I never had a job. I didn't know what to do. So I knew of little resources of none. So I needed something to help me get back on my feet. But I knew I needed to help my children to stay in the home that they were familiar in and where they were raised. So a friend came to me. She was like, "Dee, you ever heard of legal aid?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Those lawyers that can help you." I said, "Lawyers? Like, I don't have any funding right now for lawyers." She was like, "It's free." I was like, "Well, free is for me." So I did the intake. And when I did the intake, my lawyer was Patricia Dugan. In Youngstown, we call Miss Patty the housing guru, because she knows everything about housing. She treated me as if I was a paying client. She got my house out of foreclosure, but through the processes, she always kept me updated with what was going on. And she would constantly ask me, like, "Dion, do you need anything else? Can I help you with anything else?" So not only did she help me with my housing, she helped me with my license, she helped me with the inception of United Returning Citizens. And the whole time, she helped me let me start all over. She helped me with my license, she helped me with my housing, and she helped me with the nonprofit. She also helps with my entrepreneur support group that I have. We have 5 women of entrepreneurs and 5 women of nonprofit, and she comes every week with me and she helps me support that. And also Legal Aid helped me to do a very successful expungement clinic, where last year we helped and supported 152 people to get their records expunged. So how important is that? 152 people. 152 people that can navigate through their careers with no barriers. 152 people that have a second chance at life. 152 people that now have confidence in themselves again. I love it. Legal aid became an important part of my life. That is why I agreed to join the board and help in any way that I can. And that is why I agreed to come here today and share this story with you. And it's just befitting, because this is April. It is Second Chance Month, where we give education and awareness of how important it is for second chances. Legal aid is an important resource in our community, and they care not only about your situation, they care about you as a human being. To those in the room today that have supported this work financially, I thank you. Those who volunteer with legal aid, you are a community gem. For giving yourselves to others so that they can have a better life, now that's servitude. Legal aid staff, you are pillars and advocates for us, helping people with barriers, the most underserved communities that cannot afford it. Back home, we call those the 1/3 not heard, the people that are not seen or heard. So community legal aid does a great job with that. The time and effort and money you all give is greatly appreciated and needed, so be proud of your efforts. I'm here today with Executive Director of my legal aid, Steve McGarity. Steve, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the work, the partnership, the experience. I got to come to lunch yesterday and see Hillary Clinton. Who would know? And also, I'm on the 8th floor with a balcony on there. Great job. I also want to say thank you to Maria Duvouvet. That's your last name, right? So Maria is like a she-hero champion to me. Like the details of everything that she does, she cares about people so greatly. So LSC, you definitely have a rock star. And while Patty isn't here today, I'm hoping that she's watching. Hi, Patty. The live stream. I'm so happy that you were my lawyer and advocated at that time. You showed me how to show up for people and care about your job and others. You're truly a friend. And I can't wait for our next sip and chat, so give me a call. I love our sip and chats. And my years with legal aid has not only changed my life for the better, it has made me more of an effective leader and a compassionate person. So sometimes people judge you of what you've done in your past, and you always make mistakes and things. And I tell my clients, sometimes you have to go through some things to build your character. Sometimes you have to become the person that you need to be to do the thing that you need to do. And that's what happened to me. So thank you, Legal Aid, for seeing me.
Good afternoon. I'm Ron Flagg, President of the Legal Services Corporation. I want to thank our speakers today. My friend and colleague, Robert Gray, emphasized the importance of storytelling, and certainly at LSC, when we try to communicate with our funders in Congress, there's no better way to do it than to tell stories. And we were blessed this afternoon to have two great storytellers, John Grisham and Dion. And I want to say special thanks to Dion in particular for having the courage to tell her story. It's so powerful. It tells better than any of the lawyers in the room why the work that all of us in this room do is so important and how impactful it is in the lives of real people throughout the country. I would like to take a moment to thank many of you who have helped us come to this moment today, our board of directors, whose tireless leadership really has been a driving force for us for many years. Thank you to the 50th Anniversary Coordinating Committee, our Leaders Council and Emerging Leaders Council. And I want to take a moment to give a special thanks to our Client Advisory Council and Julie Reskin, a board member who set up the Client Advisory Council really through her own efforts over the course of the last decade to a point where today we have a dozen or more members of our council here today. Let's give them a big round of applause. And I want to echo my friend John Levy's shout out for Ken Frazier and Harriet Myers as co-chair of our Leaders Council. They have been, they're not just here today, they've been with us for the better part of a decade in everything we've tried to do. Harriet and Ken, thank you so much. And of course, thanks to all of you here today, particularly our colleagues from around the country, from the programs we fund. We're so grateful to you. I go from the sublime to the administrative now. Before you depart, I have a couple of housekeeping items. If you're registered for our afternoon forum, our program will take place in the Palladian Ballroom starting in roughly 15 minutes at the top of the hour. When you depart from this room, our colleagues from our LSC staff will point you in the right direction. If you cannot navigate stairs, please see our accessibility navigators in the back of the room. Again, thank you for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see all of you in the next conference room in a few minutes. Thank you.